Hey, what's going on guys? My name is Anson, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to create a very simple Discord bot with Node.js and JavaScript. Now before I even get started, I want to thank Brad Traversy for this amazing opportunity to be on his channel to teach his viewers, you guys, on how to create a Discord bot. His videos have helped many programmers including myself, and I can't thank him enough for all of the work he's done for the programming community. With all that being said, I also do have my own YouTube channel where I post on a regular basis. I post videos ranging from server-side development to front-end development. My most recent videos have been React as well as creating full-stack applications. So if that interests any of you guys, the link will be in the description. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and get started on setting up our project. So I'm assuming that all of you guys already have the prerequisite knowledge of JavaScript. If you guys don't, I would highly recommend you first learn JavaScript before attempting this tutorial because it's going to be very hard to keep up with it. Second, I'm assuming that you guys also have Node.js installed. If you don't, you can go over to nodejs.org and you can install Node.js. Discord bots are server-sided applications, so we need to make sure we're using a server-sided environment to actually run the application. Okay, but assuming you guys have JavaScript knowledge as well as Node.js installed, what we're going to do first is we're actually going to go ahead and let me open up my Windows terminal, and I'm in my documents folder right now, and I'm going to create a new directory. You can actually create this with the file explorer if you don't want to use the Windows terminal. But I'm going to type mkdir, and I'm going to call this Discord.js tutorial bot. Okay, so that's Discord.js tutorial bot. And you can see that it was just created successfully. And I'm going to go ahead and just cd into Discord.js tutorial bot. So this is going to basically change the directory. So we're currently inside documents folder, and we've just created a new folder called Discord.js tutorial bot. But I want to basically change the current directory to that new folder I just created. So I'm going to type cd, which stands for change directory. So at enter, you can see that now our current directory, we're inside Discord.js tutorial bot, which is inside the documents folder. Now I'm going to open up my text editor. Now you can use whatever text editor you want. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. So I'm just going to type code dot. You can actually just open up this folder manually by going to File, Open Folder, and then searching your file explorer. In my case, I would go to the documents folder and then search for the Discord.js tutorial bot folder, and then I would open it up. Okay, so obviously you can see right over here we have a blank area over here. We have no files. So let's go ahead and fix that. So I'm going to go ahead and just type npm init-y. This is going to create a package.json file, which is going to be very important because let's say if we want to deploy our bot, we're going to make sure we have all of our dependencies listed inside this package.json file. And we also want to make sure we have our scripts as well. The next thing we want to do is we want to install discord.js. This is a third-party module. It's not part of the Node.js core library, so we have to install it. Okay, this library is what we're going to be using to interact with the Discord API to create our Discord bot. Now, I will mention right off the bat that this library is very powerful, and it can also be a little bit complicated depending on your knowledge of programming. It's object-oriented based, so if you don't have much of an object-oriented background, it might be a little bit tricky. So I would highly recommend you guys familiarize yourself with object-oriented concepts, but I'm going to try my best to explain as much as I can at a very simple level, so you guys aren't going to be so confused with all of these, jargon, all of these terminologies. I'm going to be explaining it very, very thoroughly, so don't worry. Okay. But what we're going to do is we're going to just install Discord.js. So we're going to type npm I discord.js. Okay, and that's going to install Discord.js. It should take a couple seconds. There we go. Okay, and you can see right over here that we now have this object over here, this dependencies object, which has Discord.js and the version. Okay, we're going to also install one more dependency called the .env. This is going to allow us to use environment variables. We're going to be using environment variables to store our bot token. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a source folder. So typically what I like to do is I like to create a new folder, and I like to call it source, src. And inside the source folder, I'm going to create my bot.js file. This is going to be the main entry point to our bots. Okay, this is where we're going to keep all of our code. And what I want to do next is I want to set up a .env file. So we're going to create a new file, and notice how I'm creating this file outside of the source folder. Okay, so .env is outside of the source folder. And I'm going to create an environment variable by just typing the name of the environment variable I want to use. So I'm just going to call this Discord.js bot token. You can name it whatever you want, but you want to basically give it a name and then an equal sign, and you want to assign it a value. Now, to actually get our bot token, we need to do a couple things. We first need to actually go over to the developer portal. So you can go over to discord.com/developers/applications, and you're going to be brought to this dashboard over here. And you're going to click on new application. And I'm just going to name this DJS tutorial bot, or I'm just calling this Discord.js tutorial bot, and I'll create it, and we're going to be brought to the screen over here. So we have the client ID, we have the client secret. We're not going to worry about the client secret at all. We're going to click on bots, and I'm going to click on add bot, and we'll click on yes, do it. And there we go. We have created a bot for our application. There are many things that you can do with your Discord application, and one of the things that you can do is create a bot with it. So now that we've created our bot, we're going to go ahead and click on copy right over here where it says token, click to reveal token. We're going to click on copy, okay, and I'm going to copy and paste that right over here. Now, it's okay that I show you guys my token because this is just for tutorial purposes. It's going to be reset after this video, so don't worry. But you want to make sure you keep your bot token kept private. You never want to share your bot token with anyone, because if someone has your bot token, they can do a lot of awful things, such as deleting every single channel on your server. Depending on what permissions it has, obviously, it can kick every single user from the server. Be sure that you don't share this token with anyone, and be sure you take precaution whenever you are securing your bot token. Okay, it's very important to keep it private. Now, if someone does compromise your bot, you can actually just click on regenerate, and this will update the token. It will basically reset everything, so the previous token will not work. Okay, so if I click to reveal token, if I click regenerate, you can see that a new one was generated. I can just click on copy, and this one that we pasted will not work. So let's close this out, and let's go ahead and actually import .env. So we're going to do require .env, and I'm going to call the config function. So this is going to basically load up all of the environment variables that are inside our .env file. Now, one thing that I will mention is that if you actually have environment variables set on your operating system, these environment variables will not override them. So let's say if on my operating system I have an environment variable called discord.js_bot_token, and I have it set to some kind of value. This bot token, or I'm sorry, this environment variable will not be interpreted with this value. It's going to interpret the value set on the operating system. So it's very important you understand that, because sometimes some people do run into the issue very often. So that's why I'm naming it something that I don't have already on my operating system. Okay, so the next thing that I want to show you guys is how this basically works. So now I'm going to basically reference the environment variable. Let me console log it. So to reference the environment variable, we're going to reference the global process object. And this object has a property called .env, or env, which is an object. And we're going to reference the environment variable. So Discord.js bot token. Now I'm going to go ahead and run the bot now. So, or run the script. So we're going to type node source bot.js. Whoops, what's going on here? Node.source_bot.js. Okay, there we go. And you can see that the script worked successfully, and you can see that our token was logged to the console. Okay, so that's just a pretty simple example of how this whole thing works. Now, the next problem is that we actually don't have our bot on our server. Okay, so right now I have my test server. You can actually just create a server by doing add server and click on create a server, and you can just name it whatever you want. It's very easy. And when you have your server, what we want to do is we want to add our bot to the server. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to OAuth 2. Well, first let's get the client ID. So we're going to click on general information, and we're going to copy the client ID. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to visit this URL. So I'll leave the URL either in the video, or they'll probably, I don't know if it'll be in the description, but I'll put it in the video. Basically, you want to go to discord.com/API/OAuth2/authorize. And we're going to pass in a query string, so $client_ID. That's the query parameter. And this is going to have the value of our bot's client ID, which is what we got from right over here. Okay, you go to general information, client ID, and you copy it. Okay, and you just paste it right over there. We also need to make sure we have a scope, because if I just enter this right now, it's going to take us to here, but it says no scopes were provided. So we need to add another query parameter with ampersand, and then the name of scope, and then set this equal to bot. So now, because we're authorizing our application as a bot, now we're going to go ahead and select the server that we want to add the bot to. Now, you can only add bots to servers where you have the managed server permission. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be the owner, because there are different permissions when it comes to the Discord server. But if you're the owner, then you definitely have the managed server permission. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the server that I own, so Arizona server. And I'm just going to click authorize, and we're going to do that, and that should be it. So it should say authorized. Okay, let's close this window. Let's close this as well. Now, if I go over to Discord, you can see that it says Discord.js tutorial bot has joined. Okay, it says today at 6 12:27 a.m. and our bot is over here. Now our bot is in the server, but it's not online. So let's actually get it online. So to do that, we need to actually use code. So that's going to be the next part of this tutorial. So actually logging the bot in. So one thing that I will mention right off the bat is that if you guys need a reference to the Discord.js library, you can actually go to discordjs.org and you can click on documentation. They also do have a guide as well that you can go through if you prefer a text-based guide or text-based tutorial. It's actually very informative. The devs put a lot of effort into this, as well as documenting their entire library. So I'd highly recommend you visit this website. These are additional resources that, aside from this video, that you can reference. Okay, but we're going to go over to documentation, and we're going to be referencing the documentation a lot. So what we're going to do first is we're going to import a class directly from the Discord.js library. So I'm using the require function, and I'm basically importing Discord.js, and in between these curly braces, this is actually called object destructuring, and it also works with importing certain exports from the module. So the module itself basically is just an object that has a bunch of different exports. So those exports, we can directly import them from it. So if I want to import client, I can import client. If I want to import message, I can do that as well. But the only thing that we're going to import is client. Okay, the client itself is a class that allows us to interact with the Discord API. And to actually use this, we actually need to create an instance of that class. So we're going to do const. And I'm going to call this client with a lowercase c. It might be confusing, but if it is confusing, you can name it bots. I'm just going to name it client. And we're going to use the new keyword to create a new instance of the client class. So now we have this client object, which is an instance of the client class. Okay, and this is where the object-oriented terminology is very important. When you have a class, you can create many different instances of it, but we only need one. Okay, and now that we've created an instance of this class, we can start referencing all of the properties as well as the methods. So one of the methods that we're going to be using is the login method. This is going to take in a parameter, which is the bot token that we need to pass in, and this is going to basically log our bot in. It's going to create the connection to the Discord gateway, the Discord API. So to actually log our bot in, we're going to pass a token. Now this is the reason why I have the environment variable, is because I don't want to just paste my token in like this. Let's copy that and let's paste it in. There we go. I don't want to just paste it in like that, and you never want to do this with any type of credential because credentials are very sensitive. So you want to make sure you keep it private. You want to keep it inside an environment variable. But we're going to reference the environment variable like we did earlier. So Discord.js bots token, just like that. Okay. You want to make sure it matches. And now let's actually run our bot. So you can see right now it is currently offline, but I'm going to go ahead and just type node./source bot.js. And you can see our bot just went online, which is pretty cool. Okay, now I'm actually kind of tired of just typing node./source bot.js. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set up two scripts. I'm going to set up a start script. And this start script is actually going to be very important if we want to deploy our bot. So let's say Heroku, for example. The start script is basically just going to be an alias for node./source bot.js. Now, instead of typing that in all the time, I can just type npm run start. And you can see it's just an alias for node./source bot.js. Okay, and it's going to run the application. I'm also going to set up a dev script. This is personally what I like to do. And it basically uses nodemon. And what this is going to do is every single time I make a change to any of my file in the directory, it's going to restart the process. Now you need to make sure you have nodemon installed if you want to use this. So if you don't have nodemon installed, you can ignore this part, but I would highly recommend you install nodemon. You can just type npm i-g nodemon, and that should install it globally. And you can just type nodemon and then source bot.js, and you can see that every single time if I save, it's going to say restarting due to changes. Okay, it works like a wonder. So this is going to basically prevent you from needing to restart your application manually over and over again. Instead, it'll do it automatically whenever you make a change to your application. Okay, so for the rest of the tutorial, we're just going to be using nodemon. But like I said, if you don't have nodemon, if you have issues with nodemon, ignore it. Don't worry about it. Just use the node command or the start script that we created. Okay, so npm run dev, and there we go. So one more thing that I want to mention is that if you actually have an incorrect token, it will actually throw this error. It will say an invalid token was provided. So please make sure that you have your bot token set up correctly. Okay, if that error happens, it means that you passed in an incorrect token, or the token you probably reset the token and it said that. Okay, so always double check. Alright, so our bot is currently logged in, but what if I actually wanted to log a message to the console whenever the bot first logs in? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to listen to an event. Okay, events are very important to understand, so let me give you guys a brief overview of how events work. So everything that occurs on the Discord server or on the Discord client itself can be thought of as an event. So let's say, for example, in JavaScript in the browser, we have simple events such as the click event. So if I click on, let's say, this side over here, I can register a click event on this sidebar. And if there is a register click event, then we can execute some kind of function, right? We can pop up an alert, for example. Well, let's say, for example, if I type hello and if I type enter, and if I send that message, okay, that message is going to be sent to the channel. Okay, the Discord API is going to emit an event back to the client, and the client, which is going to be our library over here, it's going to handle that event for us. Okay, and it's going to basically emit what's called a message event. When the bot first logs in, it's going to emit a ready event. If, let's say, for example, if I react to this message over here with this emoji, that's going to trigger a message reaction add event. Okay, so I hope you guys get the idea of these events, because basically anything that we do, if I delete the message as well, that's going to trigger an event. And there are so many different events that we can use with the Discord API, which is pretty cool. If you actually want to get a whole list of events, you can actually go over to the Discord.js documentation, and if you click on client and if you scroll down over here on the side, you can see these are all of the events. Okay, the one that we're going to be using now is the ready event, which is triggered whenever the client becomes ready, so whenever the bot has successfully logged in. So to actually register an event, we're going to need to call the on method directly on the client object. Okay, so one thing that I will also mention is the client class itself extends event emitter. It's a subclass of event emitter. And what I mean subclass is that basically it inherits all of the methods and properties of the superclass, the parent class. So if you actually go over to documentation and if you go over to client, it says extends base client, and base client extends event emitter. So if you click on that, it will take you to the Node.js documentation. And if you're familiar with event emitters, you'll know how they work. Whenever one thing happens, we can manually emit an event, and then any file that listens to those events will be able to receive those events. Okay, so it's a good way to do things asynchronously as well. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to reference clients. Okay, remember it's a subclass of event emitter, so we can reference the on method, and we're going to pass in ready. That's the name of the event. So it's always going to be client.on, the name of the event, so ready, and then it's going to be a callback function as the second parameter. The callback function is how we handle the events, okay? And for the ready events, this callback function takes 0 parameters. So all we're going to do is I'm just going to say console.log the bot has logged in. Now if I save and if I go over to my terminal, it's going to say the bot is logged in. Now if I want a more descriptive log, I can also let's say if I wanted to log the bot's username and the bot's discriminator, so I can actually just use template string. So that's backticks. So instead of using quotes, I can use backticks. And we're going to use $, curly braces. So this is called string interpolation. And I'm going to reference client. And the client object itself has a property called user. Okay. And the user object itself is a client user type. And the client user type has a bunch of other properties that we can reference. So you can see over here that we can reference, let's say, for example, if I want to get the username, I can get that as well. So client.user.username, and if I save that, you can say it'll say in the console Discord.js tutorial bot. If let's say if I wanted both the username and the discriminator, I can do client.user.tag, and it'll log that to the console. Give it a second or two or three. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so I'm just gonna say has logged in. And if you go over to the documentation, I'm going to keep referencing this because it's very important. Okay, it's very well documented. So if we click on client and if I click on properties, you can see that the client itself has a bunch of properties, and one of the properties is user. And the type is a client user. If I click on that, it will tell me all the properties of client user. So I know that client.user, this user object, is a client user type. And the client user type has all of these properties such as verified, username, tag, system, presence, all these types of properties. And they also have methods too. So I would highly suggest you guys to play around with them and see what you can do with it. There's a lot of different information that you can get from every single object. So I'd highly encourage you guys to play around with it. Okay, but we'll leave it like this for now. So you can see that if I restart the bot, every single time it logs in successfully, it's going to trigger this ready event. But we're going to move on. And next thing that we want to do is we want to basically set up some basic responses from the bot. So to do that, we need to listen to another event called the message event. So remember, like I said, everything that occurs within our Discord client. So if I delete a message, that's going to trigger a message delete event. If I send a message, it's going to trigger a message event. And to show you guys that, we're going to reference the client object once again, and we're going to call the on method. And this time, and if you have this IntelliSense set up, it will show you all of the different events. So we're going to use the message event. Okay, now this time the message event takes in a parameter for the callback function. Okay, and that parameter is a message object. It's a message type. And I'm going to go to the documentation once again because I want to encourage you guys to use the documentation. If I go over to events, so remember that's classes, click on client, click on events, or scroll over down over here. And if you go over here and if you click on message, that's the name of the event. And it says emitted whenever a message is created, which basically means whenever a message is sent to a channel. And it says over here, parameter type description. So the parameter over here, these are basically the parameters for the callback function. Okay, so if you see, let's say for example, for the message reaction add, if you see more than one parameter, that means that you would need 2 parameters for the callback function. Okay, but let's focus on message for now. So you can see that this is a message parameter. The type is a message. So I click on message, you can see that I have a bunch of different properties and I have a bunch of different methods. Okay, and this is the beauty of object-oriented programming because we're basically encapsulating a bunch of different methods and properties, and we're basically putting them all together because they all relate in such a way. And with all these properties, we can reference the activity, we can reference the application, attachments. So let's say, for example, if the message has any files that were sent with it, we can get those files by referencing attachments. If I want to get the author that sent the message, I can reference message.author. Okay, if I want to get the channel that the message was sent in, I can do message.channel and etc. So let's just do a basic thing. So let's say if I want to get the actual message that the user sent, we can actually reference message.content. Okay, so if I go over here, it says the content of the message. So we're just going to go ahead and do console.log message.content. I just want to show you guys how this works. So our bot is logged in, and let's go over here. Now let's send a message. Let's say hello. And see what it says, hello. So we basically sent a message, okay? This event was emitted, and when this event was emitted, if we want to handle it, we need the callback function. The callback function takes one parameter, which is a message type, and the message object itself has a bunch of properties, and we're referencing content. Okay, now let's say if I want to get the user that sent the message, so let's log something more descriptive. So let's do something like the user, or let's do this. Message. So again, I'm using a template strings and string interpolation. So that's 2 backticks, and then we're using the $sign and then a pair of curly braces. And inside the curly brace, you want to pass in the variable value that you want to interpolate or evaluate rather. So message dots, and I want to get the author that sent the message. So like I said, we can reference the property author on the message object. And if you look over here, type of the author property is a user type. So if I open that up, I can actually see all the properties of the user type as well as the methods. So let's just do this message.author, and let's just get the tag. So that's the username, the pound symbol, as well as the discriminator. And I'll just do this. That user sent, or let's just do this. Let's create a more advanced, this is kind of like our own custom logger. And then we'll just log the message. So message.content, just like that. So let's do hello. And you can see, oh wait, our bot is not logged in yet. Just give it a couple of seconds. Okay, so let's say hi. All right, so you can see I have my discriminator and the message that I had sent. So let me just do one more. Let's just say hello world. And over there, we have hello world. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Hopefully that makes sense. But let's do something more advanced, okay? For example, let's just say if I wanted to send a message back to the user if they say hello. So what we're going to do is we're going to use an if condition, and we're basically going to check to see if message.content, remember message.content is a string. It's the actual string, the actual value that the user had sent, the actual message. And we're going to basically check to see if they sent the message hello. So we're going to compare it to the string hello, a hard-coded string. And if this is true, okay, if this condition is true, we're going to go ahead and do message. Now, if I want to send the message back to the user and tag them, I can just do message.reply, and I can just say hello there. Okay, and let's save and let's see what happens when I type hello. So hello. So see how the bot responds? It tags me. It says hello there. Let's say if I want to send a message that doesn't tag the user. So if I want to send a message and not tag the user, what you can do is you can reference the channel property. Well, first of all, let's talk about what the channel property is. If you go over back to the documentation and if you click on message class, okay, and if we go over to channel, channel is the channel that the message was sent in. And this can either be a text channel, which is any channel that is inside the actual Discord server that is text-based, or a DM channel, which is the DM between the bot itself and the user. So in case you didn't know, you can actually DM the bot. So if I click on text channel, you're going to see we have a bunch of different properties and we have a bunch of different methods. Okay, we're not going to go over every single property and method, but if I want to send a message back to the channel, the method that I would need to call is .send. And you can see over here, it says sends a message to this channel. And what's nice about this documentation, like I said earlier, is that it's well documented. It has a bunch of different examples, so you can reference it. It shows you how to send just simple text messages. You can send files. You can send embed messages, a whole bunch of things. Okay, but we're just going to send a simple message, so let's call .send. And let's just do hello. Now, one thing's going to happen, and I'm going to show you guys what's going to happen, and I'm going to show you guys how to solve it. And this is a common practice that everyone typically does in the Discord bot development community. So right now, we are checking to see if message.content equals to hello, and if it is, we'll send back hello. So we're basically sending the same message back. Watch this. Hello. And if you actually see, it's going to say hello over and over again. It's basically sending the message multiple different times. The reason why there's this delay is because there's a rate limit. And I think that's handled by the library itself to prevent you from being rate limited. So that's why it's only sending 5 messages at a time. But you can see right over here that it's happening, but why exactly is it happening? So let me actually just restart the bot so it stops spamming the channel. So the reason why this is happening is because when we send this message hello, it's going to basically evaluate this to true, right? Because message.content equals hello, that's true. And then it's going to send this message back to the channel, which is also hello. So when this message was sent by the bot, okay, this message was sent by the bot, it said hello, and when the bot sent that message, it also triggered the message event. So since that also triggered the message event, our callback function was also called as well. Okay, hence why we also have the logs over here. Because by default, this does not ignore bot messages. Okay, I just want to let you guys know that. So since it doesn't ignore bot messages, it executed this logic and it said, okay, look, message.content is also equal to hello. This is true. So it's going to send this message. So basically, infinitely will send that message over and over and over again. Of course, it didn't happen before because the message that we sent was hello world, right? We replied to the user, or hello there rather. And that is different than the actual message.content itself. So to fix this, what we want to do is at the very top level over here, we're going to go ahead and use another if condition. And we basically just want to check to see if the author of the message, so message.author, and if we go back to the documentation, remember what author is a user type. Okay, and if you actually look at the properties, there's a property called bot. Now this is a Boolean, and it basically tells you whether or not the user is a bot. So if message.author.bot is true, then that means the author of the message is a bot. Now, obviously, we don't have to compare it to true. We can just do if message.author.bot. And then if this is true, we can just return and that basically will stop anything from executing after. So this will pretty much ignore bot messages. Of course, if you want to handle bot messages, you can handle it manually. You just want to make sure that nothing else happens after, so you just want to return. So now let's go ahead and go back up here, or go inside this if condition over here, and let's go ahead and send hello again, and let's see what happens. So see how this time the bot sends the message perfectly fine, but it doesn't send it over and over again because we are checking to see if the message was sent by a bot, and if it is, we are returning, so it's not going to execute anything after this line over here. So hopefully that part makes sense. So that's a very simple response from the bot. Alright, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to show you guys how to get started with setting up some simple commands for our Discord text channels. So if you guys aren't familiar with what text commands are, basically with most chat applications, they have their own commands, and they basically enhance the usage of the chat. If you actually look on Discord, if you type /, there are actually some built-in commands that Discord provides for you. But these commands aren't enough because sometimes we might want certain commands to do other things, such as fetching data from an API or getting data from a database, etc. So we're going to go ahead and create our own commands. So one thing that I will need to mention is that commands basically start with a prefix. So in our case, we're going to use the $ for our prefix, and then after the prefix is going to be our command name. So for example, $ and then kick, that would be the kick command. And commands typically do not have spaces, and you shouldn't have spaces with your commands. It's going to make it a lot harder to really set it up anyways. But after the space, everything else after that is implied to be a command argument. So for example, if I want to set up a simple kick command, I want to kick someone from the server, I would do $kick, and then I would pass in the user ID. So the user ID could be 123, and I would kick a user if they were found in the guild or in the server. Okay, so hopefully that part makes sense. So let's go ahead and just get started with this. So inside my bot.js file up top over here, I'm just going to declare a variable as constant called prefix, and I'm going to assign it the value of $, which is basically just going to be a string. Okay, this can be whatever you want. I would recommend you not use the @ symbol because that would try to @ users. You shouldn't also use the /, but I'm just going to use $, for now. So what I'm also going to do next is inside the message event, because remember, when we send the command, it's also a message which is going to emit the message event. What I'm going to do is I'm first going to check to see if the message itself, if the message.content, okay, if it starts with prefix. So the starts with method is a method on the string prototype because we know content is a string. So we can call .startsWith to check to see if it starts with a substring, which in this case we're checking to see if the message starts with prefix. So if it does, then that means they're trying to issue a command. And that command could either be a valid or invalid command, which we'll handle ourselves later. So the next thing that we're going to do is we want to get the actual command name. So we know for a fact that everything after the prefix is expected to be the command name. So for example, if I do $, let's say Google search, okay, our command name is going to be Google search. So what we're going to do is we're going to get that command name after the prefix. So to do that, well, first let's declare a variable called command name. And I'm going to go ahead and reference message.content once again. And I'm going to call the substring method because we want to extract a substring from an entire string. So whenever you want to get a string, like a certain part of a text from an entire string, you would want to use the substring method. So the substring method can take in 1 or 2 parameters. So you can see over here it says returns a substring at the specified location. Now we want to return the substring at the position after the command prefix. Okay, in our case with strings, the command prefix itself is at position number 0. So we want to return everything that's after the prefix, which is going to start from position 1 all the way up to the end over here. Okay, so now to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first pass in prefix.length. Okay, so now watch this. So if I console log command name, I want to show you guys what the actual output is. So let's go over here. Let's just wait for our bot to log in. Should in just a couple minutes. Okay, there we go. So let's do kick, and you're going to see it gives us kick. So once again, if I do kick, that's going to give us kick. But if I actually do kick 1, 2, 3, that's actually going to give us the entire string after the prefix. So if we want just the command name, we can't just do this because we'll have not only the command name, but the arguments after. Okay, remember what I said earlier, that you should never have spaces in your commands. Okay, so what we're actually going to do is we're going to assume that every single argument is going to be split up by spaces. We're going to, let's just call .trim. So this will trim all the white space before and after. Okay, or actually, you know what? Let me do that right over here. Let me do that before substring. So that will trim all the white space before and after. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is, let me actually format this a little bit nicer so it looks, so we don't have a long line of code. So after dot substring, I'm going to split it up. So I'm going to split it by using a simple space over here. Now, this is going to return an array, so it doesn't make sense to call this a command name anymore. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something called array destructuring. Okay. And what I'm doing first is the first element in the array is going to be destructured into this command name variable. And then every other element after that array is going to be stored inside this args variable, which is going to be an array. So with this spreader operator, what it's basically doing, it's basically just unpacking all of those elements in the array into this args variable. So let me show you how that looks like. So if I do command name, if I do args, and let's try this again. So let's do kick 1 2 3. You're gonna see we have the command name, and then we have 1 2 3. If I do kick 1 space 2 space 3, it's going to give me an array of all the arguments. Okay, so I know it's a little bit weird, but watch what happens if I just did args. Okay, if I just did args 1 2 3, it would basically give me only 1, but I want everything, so I'm going to use the spreader operator. Okay, that's what this is called, the spreader operator. So hopefully that part makes sense. Now, one more thing that I should also address too is, let's say for example, if I did kick 1 2 3 space 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 and then 4 5 6. Watch what happens. It's actually going to give us a bunch of different spaces. So to actually solve that, we can actually use what's called a regular expression, which allows us to basically match for a pattern in the string. So instead of just having a hard-coded single white space, we can do a regular expression. So I'm going to basically use a simple regular expression like this. So this is basically going to match all white spaces. Okay, so let's copy this again and let's see what happens. We got to wait for our bot to log in first. There we go, and there we go. You can see that we only have 2 arguments, so although we had a lot of different spaces, it only treats them as 2 arguments. Okay, so hopefully this whole concept of commands makes sense. Okay, the anatomy of a command, that is, so we have the prefix, we have the command name, and we have the arguments. Okay, so now that we've parsed our commands correctly, we can go ahead and actually check to see what the command the user executed. So if I want to check to see if the user, let's say if they did a simple command such as kick, so we're going to do if command name is equal to kick. Okay, we're going to just do something like message.channel. We're just going to pretend like we kick the user for now, and then we're actually going to kick the user. So kick the user. Let's just make sure it works. You always want to make sure you're testing your code. This is like kick 1 2 3, kick the user. So we know that this works. Okay, let's do another command. So let's just say, for example, I can also do an else if condition after. And let's say if I want to do ban, and let's just pretend like we ban the user. Ban the user. And let's do that again. So if I do kick 1 2 3, ban 1 2 3, ban the user. Perfect. So if I just did kick itself, it would still execute that. So now let's actually implement our command. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the kick command for now. So when it comes to kicking users, there's a couple things we have to do first. First, we need to actually make sure that the user that we're trying to kick is actually in the guild, because if they aren't in the guild, then we can't kick them. However, when it comes to banning, you can actually ban people that are not in the guild. So what we're going to do is we're first going to get the member object first. Okay, so I'm going to declare a variable called member, and I want to get the member object from the guild. In order to do that, we need to actually get the guild object. So remember that if we actually refer to the documentation, okay, right now we currently only have the message object itself. So when it comes to using this library itself, you basically need to get all of your information from either the client object or the object that you had that's inside of the scope of the function. In our case, we have the message object, and we can use the message object to get all types of data that we want. Hopefully that makes sense. So for example, if I wanted to get the channel, I can do message.channel. If I wanted to get the guild that the message was sent in, I can do message.guild. If I wanted to get the member object of the user that sent the message, I can do message.member, and etc. Okay, but we're going to get the guild object, so we're going to reference member or message.guild. And you can see if I click on the documentation, I have a bunch of properties and methods on guild. We'll take a look at this in just a sec. But first, we'll do message.guild. And what I'm going to do after is I'm going to reference the members property. Now, if you want to look at it, you can see on the documentation, the members property itself is a guild member manager. Okay, and the guild member manager basically manages all of the members that belong to the guild, and there are other properties and methods. So you can do things such as banning the user, you can fetch a user, you can prune the user, or yeah, you can prune the user, you can resolve the user, you can unban the user, etc. Now notice how there's no kick method. So we actually need to get the member from the cache. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and reference message.guild.members. Remember, that's the guild member manager, and the guild member manager has a property called cache. Okay, now cache is actually a collection. Okay, now if you actually want to know what a collection is, you can actually click on the documentation over here and it'll tell you what it is. But collections are basically just like maps. Okay, so this was an additional class that was built on top of maps. It extends maps. Okay, and it has additional utility methods. It's actually very, very easy to use. It's nothing crazy. Okay, the base map itself doesn't have a method such as filter or reduce or sort, but this collection itself does. Okay, so when you think about maps, you can think about key value pairs, and when it comes to Discord, everything has an ID. Users have an ID, I have an ID. So for example, if you want to get my ID, I can right click, copy. That's my ID. If I want to get the ID of a message, I can right click the message and I can click on copy ID. That's the message of the ID. That's the ID of the message. If I want to get the ID of a channel, I can right click it and I can paste it over there. Okay, so it makes sense for the library devs to store everything inside collections because everything is mapped by an ID. And when you reference things in a map, it's actually much faster than looping through an array, for example. Okay, we're not going to go super in depth in time complexity, but I just wanted to mention that. So if I want to get the actual member object from the cache, which is a collection / map, okay, if collections seem confusing to you, just think of the cache as a map. And you can see over here that this map itself, okay, it maps the ID of the guild member to the actual guild member object itself. And if I actually click on guild member, it'll give me the documentation for it, and it'll give me all the properties and all the methods. Okay, so let's take this one step at a time. First, let's call .get. Remember, this is the same exact method that's part of the map, and we're going to pass in the actual user ID. Okay, so for this kick method, or for this kick command, I'm actually expecting args, which is an array, okay, to be non-empty. So I'm going to do one check. I'm going to go ahead and check to see if args.length is equal to 0. Then I'm just going to return a message, and I'm going to say message.reply, please provide an ID. So that way, after I send this message, I don't have to, it won't execute anything else after. Okay, but if they actually did provide an ID, then this would be false. So I'm just going to go ahead and reference args subscript 0, just like that, because that's going to be the ID, because we're only going to kick one user. Okay, so now watch this. If I go ahead and console log member, let's go ahead and go into the console. First, let's do this. Let's do kick 123. You're going to see that it says undefined. If I do kick, it says Anson, please provide ID. If I do kick space, it's going to do the same thing. Okay, now if I want to kick a user, let's go ahead and kick this bot over here. Let's try to. I'm going to paste the ID, and notice how we don't get the error message back. And if I look in the console, we have all of the data of the guild member. See, it's a guild member object. It has the guild property. It has a bunch of other properties as well. Okay, we're not going to reference every single one of them, but we just need to make sure we have this guild member object. Okay, and if you look at the documentation, you have all the properties and all the methods. And if you click on them, it will tell you what each property represents. And if you click on the methods, it will tell you what each method does. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to check to see if member is truthy, because if this member is not found in the cache, then that means the member is likely not actually in the guild itself. Okay, so we're going to check to see if member is truthy. So if member, so if that's the case, then we're going to go ahead and kick the user. So I can actually just do member.kick. Okay, and I can provide a reason if I want to, but I'm not going to do that for now. And if the member is not found, then we'll just say message And we'll send this message to the channel and not reply to the user. So we'll just say that member was not found. Okay, so watch this. Let's first do kick 1 2 3. That member was not found. Okay, now watch this. If I try to kick this bot, you're gonna see that an error is gonna happen, and it's saying missing permissions because our bot does not have permissions. So we need to go ahead and give our bot permissions. So typically what you should do is you should create a separate role for your bot. So for example, I'm going to create, I'm just going to create a special role, Discord bots. Okay. And you want to basically, let me give it a color just to, so it can stand out a little bit. Okay. You also want to make sure that the bot itself has permissions above other users. So for example, this Discord bot is above everyone. Okay, but it won't be able to actually do anything to verified, bot, moderator, admin. So if you're kind of new to Discord and if you don't really understand the whole role hierarchy, basically, for example, if my bot only has this Discord bot role and it's trying to kick someone with a verified role, it won't be able to do that because the role is higher. Okay, so I'll show you an example. But you want to make sure that for this role, you want to give its kick members. Okay. And let's go ahead and do this. So first, let's give this guy the Discord bot's role. So it will be able to kick BrainyBot because it doesn't have roles. But first, let me give it the verified role real quick. Hold on. Let me do this. Let's just make it so they can do that. Okay. There we go. So let me go ahead and make it so that it can kick this bot over here. So now if I do kick, you're going to see that nothing happens. Even though we do have the role, it does have the permission. Okay, it has the actual kick members permission, but it still isn't able to kick it because it is underneath the verified role. Okay, so that's just pretty much a high-level explanation of the whole role hierarchy. So if you actually wanted to be able to kick the verified role, or any user with the verified role, then you would need to put it on top of it. So if I save, and I'm going to get the ID again, if I kick, notice how the bot is gone. And there's no error this time. These were from the previous ones, but notice how the bot is gone because we just kicked it. Okay, now, if I also take away the verified role from this guy over here, so let's do kick, and let's do copy ID. Okay, notice how it still works. So any role that is underneath the Discord bot's role will be able to be kicked or banned, okay, if we give the ban permissions. So hopefully that part makes sense. Okay, and obviously if I try to kick, them again, it's going to say the member was not found. So it's very important that you understand the whole permission hierarchy as well as the whole role hierarchy. Okay, but that's pretty much the simple gist of the kick command. Okay, it's that simple. All right, so let me go ahead and just get my user back on the server. Okay, so let's just say, for example, if the bot doesn't have permissions, so let's just give it the verified role again. Well, let's give it a different role. Let's give it the admin role. Okay, so let's say if the bot did not have permissions, we should technically send some kind of message to the console or the channel, letting the user know that they don't have permissions, or the bot doesn't have permissions. So notice how in the console earlier we had this unhandled promise rejection warning. So one thing that I should mention, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is that whenever you call methods like .kick, okay, it'll actually return a promise. Okay, so we should technically handle the promise, and we should also handle our errors in case it happens, because you never know what could happen. So when we resolve the promise, this will actually return the actual guild member that was kicked. So if I go to here, it will say kicks this member from the guild, and it returns promise guild member. So let me go ahead and do this. So let's handle the promise by calling .then. This is going to give us the member that was kicked. So I'm just going to do member. And what I'll do is I'll actually just send a message to the channel. Okay. And I'm just going to say, let's do this. Member was kicked. Okay. So the reason why I'm using string interpolation is because I want to actually mention the member that was kicked. So to do that, you can actually just pass in the member parameter directly inside in between the curly braces. And it will actually at the user, which is pretty cool. Now, if they don't have permissions, we're just going to send a message. We're just going to say message.channel.send. I do not have permissions. Okay, now keep in mind that the bot permissions are completely different than actual user permissions. So you should always make sure you're checking to see who's executing certain commands. So in our case, this kick command is technically a moderation command. So you want to make sure that you're checking to see if moderators are using this command. Okay, so for example, let's go ahead and do this. Let's try to kick Yeti again. So it's going to say, I do not have permissions. So it technically does, but it can't kick it. Or I don't have permissions to kick that user. Well, let's just do this. I cannot kick that user. Okay, and it could be due to either permissions or the person's higher. Okay? And let's just get rid of the rule again. And let's kick them again. And now see it says Yeti was kicked. And if I click on it, it'll display the actual user card. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Now, if we wanted to actually check to see if the person that was executing the command was either a moderator or admin or an owner, we could do that. We can actually do that right up top over here. So let's say, for example, I can do something like if message.member. So this time I'm referencing message.member instead of message.author, because there's a difference between the actual user type and the guild member type. When we're talking about permissions, roles, nicknames, we want to reference the member. If you're trying to get the user's discriminator or the user's username, you want to get that from the actual user type itself. But I'm going to go ahead and just check to see if the member has permission. So this is another method. And I can actually just pass in certain permissions. So for example, I want to make sure that the user has kick members. Okay, so if the user has kicked members, then we'll let them use it. If they don't, then we'll just return a message. We'll just say you do not have permissions to use this command. So if you don't have the permission, we'll just do message.reply. You do not have permissions to use that command. And that should be pretty straightforward. So let's try this again. And this time I'm going to actually have to do this for my alt account. So let me go ahead and just invite my user again. So let me just go to my other account. Okay, so I am in the channel, and I'm just going to type kick. And notice how it says you do not have permissions to use that command. Okay, but if I give it, let's say if I give it the Discord bots role, which does have the permission, and if you kick again, notice how it's saying a different message. It's saying please provide an ID, which basically said that this part was false, so it didn't return. And then it goes over here. If I try to do, let's do one more thing. Let's do kick 1, 2, 3. It just says that member was not found. Okay, so our other account does have permission to use the command. If I get rid of it again, you do not have permission to use that command. Okay, so hopefully that's pretty straightforward. Now let's do one more command. Let's do a ban command. So if I want to do a ban command, it's very similar to the kick command. Okay. But actually, the nice thing about the ban command is that we don't actually need to check to see if the user's in the guild, because we can ban users that are not in the guild. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to check to see if the command name is equal to ban this time. And I'm going to copy and paste this code over here. But this time, instead of checking to see if the permission is kick members, we're going to check to see if the person has ban members permission. Okay, so if they have this permission, then we're going to allow them to use that command. If they don't, then we will just send that message back. And I'll also copy this as well. And you can see we have a lot of reusable code, which you can start to see that it's actually, becoming a little bit messy. But of course, like I said, the whole point of the tutorial is to make something that's very simple. I don't want to, create some kind of crazy opinionated structure. But if you guys are interested in that, I do have a lot of different tutorials on my channel that cover so many different things with Discord bots, so feel free to check it out. But for now, we'll just stick with this. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to reference the guild object again. So we're going to do message.guild, and we're actually going to reference members, and we're going to call the ban method. And the ban method takes in what's called a user resolvable. So user resolvable can either be the actual user object, it can be the member object, it can be the ID of the person that you're trying to kick or ban, or I'm sorry, it can be the ID of the person that you're trying to ban. If you click on ban, okay, so if you click on user resolvable, it'll tell you what it is. So it can either be the user object, it can be the ID, which is known as a snowflake, it can be the message object, so that will just pretty much resolve to the author of the message, okay, or it could be the guild member object itself. So in our case, we're just going to pass in the ID directly. So we don't have to actually fetch the member from the cache. We can just pass in args subscript 0, and that'll just directly ban the user. So for example, let's go ahead and try this. So one thing that I also want to do is I want to actually handle the errors, of course. So I'm just going to go ahead and just catch the error. I'm not going to resolve the promise with the .then. I'll just log the error for now, just to show you guys what the errors look like. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's try to do ban 123, and let's see what happens. So you can see that it actually says unknown user. Okay, so unknown user basically means that the user is not found. So let me actually get the ID of a different bot that I have. It's not in the guild, but if I do that, it's gonna say missing permissions. Okay, so unknown user. So this user is not found, but this user was. Okay, and this is basically one of my other bots. So right now it says we're missing permissions. Our bot is missing permissions. So we're gonna have to give our bot permissions now. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go back to the role and let's just enable ban members. And let's try to do it again. And if you look over here, we don't have the error anymore. It actually banned the user. If I actually want to see all of the users that are banned, I can go to server settings. And you can see that I have Cinderace, which is my other bot. That's the user that I banned. So if you actually pass in an invalid user, then it actually won't work. So the user actually needs to exist, but the user doesn't have to be in the same guild. Okay, so let's actually handle our errors. Like I said, we always want to handle our errors to provide any messages back to the user in case something doesn't work. But this time, you know what I'm going to do? Instead of using .then and .catch, I want to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to use async await. So if you guys are not familiar with async await, I highly recommend you learn and familiarize yourself with that, because with Discord.js, a lot of these methods that you're going to call are going to return promises. And there are going to be some times where you're going to actually need the data that is returned, okay, and you might want to reuse it for later on. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the async keyword all the way in front of our callback function. And then right over here, the .ban method will return a promise, okay? It's actually going to return the member that was banned, or it's going to return the user or member that was banned, okay? And what I'm going to do is, instead of using .then and .catch, I'm actually going to use try catch this time. I know it seems pretty messy, like our code seems pretty messy, but the whole point is I want to show you guys the different techniques that you can go about it, because with Discord.js, it's a more advanced library. So I want to do what I can to show you guys different techniques when it comes to, you know, writing your code using the Discord.js library. Okay, so in order to actually use async await successfully, we need to first actually await this method call. So I'm going to do const, and since this returns the actual user or member object itself, I'm just going to call this const user. Okay, and we're going to await the promise. So this is going to wait until this promise has been fulfilled, and it's going to return the user object. Now, if I console log the user, it's going to give us the actual user data. And if I console log the error, it will tell us the error. So let's try this again. So let's go ahead and do ban 123. Okay, and let's type that, and it's going to say unknown user. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And let's also do this. Let me do one more thing. Let's do ban, and let me get the ID of my other bots. So this bot is on the server, like I said, and if I ban the user, you're going to see that it returns the ID. Now notice how it actually doesn't return the user object. And if you actually look over here, or let me actually go to the documentation to show you guys this so it makes more sense. If you go over here, it returns a promise, and the promise resolves either the guild member, the user, or the snowflake. The snowflake is the ID. The reason why it's returning the snowflake is because this user is actually nowhere to be found in the actual client's cache. Okay, so because our bot is actually, because the user that we're banning is actually not in any mutual guild that our bot is in, it's just going to return the ID. Okay, but if the bot was actually in the same guild that it was in as our other bot, then it would actually return the actual object itself. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just simply, we're just going to display message. We'll just do message.channel.send. User was banned successfully. Okay, and if an error happens, we should always send the error to the channel. We can say something like, an error occurred. Either I do not have permissions, or the user was not found. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's unban the other user. So let's unban my other bot account. And when I say bot account, what I mean is like an actual Discord application. Like self-botting is actually against terms of service. So I just want to clarify, I'm not self-botting. The account that I'm using is an actual other Discord bot account that I created through the portal. Okay, it's just in a different guild and I don't have another account to use. Okay, I mean, I could just ban this one, but I'll do that later. But the whole reason why I'm showcasing this is because I want to show you guys how to ban users that are not in the same guild. So if I do ban, user was banned successfully. Perfect. And let me ban this guy. There we go. User was banned successfully. Pretty straightforward. So that is pretty much it when it comes to kicking and banning. Okay, so the one thing that I'm going to show you guys how to do next is to set up a simple role reaction system. Okay, so this is going to be a very basic one. We're not going to be using a database for this. So what we want to do is whenever we react to a certain emoji, when we react to a message with a certain emoji, it's going to give us a specific role. I'm sure you guys have seen something like this before, where if you go join a Discord server and then you click on, let's say, the roles channel, there are a bunch of messages and then it tells you which emoji will give you which role. So I have a couple of roles set up on my server already, but you just want to go over to roles and then just click on this plus sign and just create whatever role you want. So I can just call this role Node.js, for example. You also want to make sure that your bot has the manage roles permission. If it doesn't, it won't be able to add roles. And one thing that I need to mention is that your bot will only be able to add roles to any role that's below the actual role the bot has. So what that means is this bot over here, it has the Discord bots role. So that means it's only going to be able to add users to any role underneath it. So if it tries to add the user to the bot, moderator, or admin role, it's not going to work. So let's go ahead and set up our message. So we're going to have a JavaScript, and I guess we can use whatever emoji we want. I'm going to use Apple. We'll do Python. So for Python, we'll do we have a banana emoji? For C#, we will do grapes. And then what was the last one? Java. We shall do peach. So basically, we're going to send this message. Whoops, made a mistake over here. And ideally, what we want to do is we want to just add one of these reactions, and it's going to give us the role. So if I add the Apple emoji, it's going to give us the JavaScript role. If I add the banana emoji, it's going to give us the Python role. If I add the grape emoji, it's going to give us C#. And if I add the peach emoji, it's going to give us the Java role. So let's go ahead and implement this. So there's actually a couple things we need to do. One, we need to listen to a new event. Okay, so we're no longer inside the message event anymore. We're actually going to listen to a new event, and it's called message reaction add. Whoops, there we go. Okay, so this is another event, and the callback function takes in two parameters. It's going to take in the message reaction object. So we're going to name it reaction, and it's going to take in a user object. Okay, so the reaction object itself has properties such as the message it was reacted to, the emoji that it was reacted with, and the user object represents the user that reacted to the message. So if we want to get the ID of the user that reacted to the message, then we can do that as well. Okay, now the very next thing that we want to do is we want to check to see which message is receiving these reactions. So what I'm going to do is I want to check to see if reaction.message.id. So remember, reaction has a property called message, and message has a property called ID. Everything has an ID. Or not everything, but most things have an ID. So we're going to first check to see if the ID of the message matches this, because that's the ID of the message. I right-clicked it, and I clicked on copy ID, and I pasted it in just like that. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to check to see if any of these emojis were added. We're using Unicode emojis. Okay, so with Unicode emojis, they actually don't have IDs. We're going to check the name instead. So we're going to get the name by we're going to destructure this from the reaction.emoji property. So remember, this is the message reaction object, and it has the emoji property, and the emoji property has the name. Okay, so now I can actually check to see which emoji they reacted with. So we're going to use a switch case. And then the first case I'm going to have is I want to check to see if they react with the Apple emoji. Now, how do we actually get the name of it? Is it actually named Apple? Well, not quite. I can't do something like case Apple, or I can't do something like if name is equal to Apple. Instead, since these are Unicode emojis, we need to actually get the Unicode itself. So to do that, on the Discord client, you can actually do /:, and the name of the emoji, so Apple, and you can actually copy it, and you can actually just paste it directly in there. We're going to do the same thing with banana, grapes, and then peach. Okay, so we can just directly copy that. So just break right over here. We're just going to set up our switch case real quick. And then we will copy that as well. So now if they react with the Apple emoji, we're going to go ahead and give them the JavaScript role. So now we actually need to give the role to the user. So we're going to go ahead and copy the ID of the JavaScript role. And then what we're going to do is whenever they react with the Apple emoji, we are going to just give the role to the member. Okay, so when I say member, we need to actually get the member object itself. So what I'm going to do is right outside over here, all on the top, I'm actually going to go ahead and get the member from the guild. So to do that, from here now, we need to reference the guild property or the guild object somehow. Well, we can do that by simply doing this. Reaction.message. Okay, remember, the reaction has a property called message. And like we did before, the message has a property called guild. And guild has a property called members. Okay, this is a guild member manager. And this is a collection of all of the guild members. Or, I'm sorry, not a collection. This is a manager. To get the actual collection, we would reference cache, which is the collection. So now we can reference this cache. Remember, the cache is just a collection, also known as a map. Okay, the collection is a map. So we can call the .get method. And then we can pass in the ID of the user to get the actual member. Let me name this member. I didn't mean to name it guild, sorry. So we're going to pass in user.id. Okay, remember there's a huge difference between users and members. To add a role to a particular person on the server, you need to get the member object. Okay, to update permissions, you need to get the member object, etc. So now, if that's true, we're going to reference member.roles, and then we can just pass in the ID of the role. And then we're going to do the same thing for banana. So banana was Python. So let's get the Python role. Member.roles.add Python. Let me just make sure. Okay, there we go. C# was, I think, grape. So member.roles.add grape. And let's do one more. I think Python was peach, right? Or no, Java was peach, sorry. Java. Okay. So member.roles.add. Alright, so let's just see how this works. Okay, first let's actually... So I'm actually going to show you one thing real quick. Okay, so watch this. So our bot is going to restart. And I want to show you guys something. So let me open up the logs over here, the console. I'm going to go ahead and react with the Apple emoji. And you're actually going to notice that nothing is happening in the logs. I actually did not receive the role. Nothing happened. And you're probably wondering, well, is our code broken? Well, not necessarily. Okay. So let me show you one more thing. Let me actually send a message. And let me react with the Apple emoji again. And you're going to see right over here that it does say hello this time. So the question is, why did it not work for this message? But why did it work for this message? Okay, so in Discord.js, the library itself actually caches your messages. What that means is whenever a message is sent to any channel, it's stored in a collection, okay? Now, the message reaction add event is only emitted for cached messages only. So if the message is in memory, if it's saved in the collection, it's going to emit this event. If it's not, it will not emit this event by default. So in order to work around this, we need to actually opt into something called partials. So partials are a Discord.js concept that allow you to handle uncached data. So data that is not stored in the cache, but it will still allow you to use the event itself. Okay, so luckily we actually just need to write one line of code. So inside the constructor, so new client all the way on line 4, we're going to pass in an object inside the parentheses, and we're going to specify partials. And we're going to enable the user, or not user, we're going to enable the message partial and then the reaction partial because we're using message reaction add. So we need both of these. So now this should work without any doubt. So if I go back to the console, and I'm going to react with a different emoji this time. So just give a sec. Okay, so let's give it the banana emoji. And you're going to see this as hello. And did it give us the role? It did. It gave us the Python role. Let me react with the grapes emoji. It gave us the C# role. And let's react with the peach emoji. It's going to give us the Java role. So notice how now it's working, before it wasn't. The reason why is because we opted into partials. Okay, when our bot restarted, this message was nowhere to be found in cache. Now, if you actually fetch the message from the Discord API, it will be cached. But once your bot goes offline and then comes back online, this message is nowhere to be found in the collection of messages that are cached. So in order to get it to work, if it's not cached, you need to make sure you opt into partials. So let's react with orange. And notice how nothing's going to happen. Okay, it will still trigger the event, but nothing's going to happen. Okay, and likewise, even if I send a new message and I'll react with, let's say, green apple, it's still going to work. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully that gives you an understanding on why you need to use the partials. Now, if you want to remove the role, you can just do the same thing. So we're going to copy that code and we're going to paste it. And this time we are going to use the message reaction remove event. Okay, and instead of doing roles.add, we're going to do roles.remove. Now let's save. And like I said, because we are opted into the partials, this will work. So let's try it again. So I have all the roles, well, not all of them. I need to let me give myself the JavaScript role. So let's give us that role. So I have all the roles. So now let's go ahead and unreact. You can see it got rid of the JavaScript role. It got rid of the Java role. Okay, it got rid of the C# role, and then it got rid of the Python role. If I react again, it's going to give me the JavaScript role. So that's pretty much how it works. So hopefully this was a very simple system that shows you guys how to set up reaction roles. And just some advice, make sure you do not allow users to add themselves to the admin role, okay, or any moderated role that might be underneath the Discord bots role. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how to use webhooks now. So if you guys are not familiar, Discord actually has webhook integration. So you can actually use, for example, webhooks with GitHub. So whenever someone triggers some kind of event on your GitHub repository, such as a star, a fork, a pull request, it will send that message to a specific channel. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and first set up a webhook. So you actually need to go into a channel that you want the webhook to send messages to. So if I go over to general, if I click on edit channel, and if I click on integrations, you're going to see that I actually do have one webhook. Okay, so I have a webhook right over here. Let me go back there. And I can create a bunch of webhooks that do different things. So for example, I'll create this webhook and I'll just call this announcements. Okay, and you can select the channel that you want the webhook to be in. So we'll just leave it as general. And now you actually want to get the information of the webhook. So we're going to copy this webhook URL. So if we actually paste this URL into our browser, you can see we have basically a JSON object returned. So let's go ahead and first let's get the ID. So the ID is right over here. This the webhook ID is after this webhook's route. Okay, so we're going to copy that part. And then the token is everything after that. Okay, so I'm going to save these things inside an environment variable. So let me go ahead and open up this. And we're going to call this webhook ID, webhook token. So first let's get the ID. So there we go. Now let's get the token. There we go. Just like that. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is we want to instantiate the webhook client class. So Discord.js comes with the webhook client class that makes it very easy to use webhooks. So we're going to go ahead and import that class from the Discord.js module. And now we're going to go ahead and declare a new variable. We're going to call it webhook client. And we're going to use a new keyword to instantiate webhook client. And it takes in 3 parameters. The last one is option. The last one is the options. But we're going to take in the ID, so that's the webhook ID. So we're going to reference that through the environment variable. So that's webhook ID, and then webhook token. Okay, there we go. Perfect. So now we can actually write a simple command to send webhook messages. So now we're going to go down all the way to inside our message event. After our band command, we're going to write an else if statement that's going to check to see if the command name is equal to announcements. Okay, so this is basically going to be a simple announcements command with webhooks. Obviously, you can use regular messages, but we'll use webhooks because you can obviously use webhooks for a bunch of different things aside from Discord. You can use it with Slack messages, I think. I think Slack has webhooks. You can also use it with GitHub. You can just Google like which services have webhooks integration, and you can just play around with that. So now we want to basically take in as an argument the actual message that the user wants to send. So for example, our prefix is $. So announce. So actually change this to announce. Okay, and now I want to say something like hello world, and I want to at everyone. The problem is right now we're splitting all of our arguments with a regular expression that eats up all the white space. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the reverse. We're going to join everything with a space instead. Okay, so we're going to join all of our arguments. So const message, and that's going to we're going to be taking args, which is our array of arguments, and we're going to join it with a space. The reason why is because, like I said, args is an array that is split up by white space. So in order to get the actual original message, we need to reverse the operation and join it back. And I'll console log it too so you guys can see what it looks like. Now let's actually send the message with the webhook client. So webhook client.send, and we're going to pass in message. And now give it some time. And now it's hello world. So see how it says hello world at everyone, which is pretty cool. It also can mention roles, which is very useful. Okay, I can do announce hello. Perfect. And if I look at the console, you can see that this right over here, this array is the value of args, and then this string over here is the value of message. So this is what happens after we join it. Okay, the only downside to this is if you have a message that has a bunch of white space, it will not work. It will still work. It will just join it back again. That's probably the only caveat to this. And that is pretty much it for this whole entire tutorial. Once again, I want to thank Brad for this amazing opportunity to be on his channel to teach you guys how to create a Discord bot. I had a lot of fun making this whole video. If you guys have any questions, feel free to just leave a comment down below. And any follow-up questions, I'll be happy to help you guys out. And that is pretty much it for this whole video. Peace.